Alright, this game is Siege of Constantinople, continuing on in the Quadra game Art of Siege spirit. This came out a little before the Quadra game did. It was, as with most Quadra games, released as kind of a, hey, here's one of the games in an S&T magazine, sort of. There's Art of Siege. I put it back up, but never worry, we will be doing Lille and Sebastopol. Anyway, when I say sort of, it's because Tyre and Acre shared a certain amount of roles. Lille and Sebastopol are completely different. They share a feel, but I don't believe they share roles terribly well. This one does not share anywhere near the same rule set as Tyre and Acre do. And you can see that right away when you start looking between this and the chart where there are different walls that are on hex sides instead of whole hexes. And these walls interior, not that they matter much, are also on hex sides. So obviously we're seeing some differences here. We also see we have these counters for the damage to the walls. That's kind of similar, except they go up higher. The breach still happens at 6. This is the first time I'm going to be trying it with the naval rules. I picked them up on eBay or somewhere reasonably recently. If this moves magazine, the extended 3-player rules for War of the Ring did not excite me. I think I got it after I played War of the Ring, actually, but maybe not. I know I got one magazine before that didn't have anything. I was looking for the 5-player roles, actually, which I don't know where they are. I don't think I have them. Anyway, the extended rules add the naval units, and well, I got some little homemade counters for that, and then some more over here. And there's no picture on them, which may kind of disturb you. I don't know what kind of picture you would expect in this era, but there's no call for one. And no real need, actually. All you need is the stats on the counters. You don't really need what they are. Alright, well, there was one successful semi-siege of Constantinople that was won by treachery during the Fourth Crusade, I believe. And since that time, the city has degenerated quite a bit. It's essentially no longer this massive metropolis that it was through the early Middle Ages. Instead, what it really is a walled compound of towns and villages. That's kind of hard to represent, but that's okay because the game doesn't bother terribly much with fighting in the interior of the city. It's kind of like Acre. The Muslim or the Ottomans just have to get a certain amount of force in to play. And like the other siege games, it has the same sort of feel, though, of bombarding, and I say though because I say, well, it's not really similar, well, of bombarding and breaking the walls down, filling the fosse, and trying to break your way into the city. But there are these guys. Oh, those I haven't set up yet. There are some significant differences there, and I'm kind of worried about this hole here. I may have set up poorly if that's there and have to fix that as well. For one thing, the combat units in the other games only had 2 values. Here they have 3, and those values are a little different. We have an attack strength, a morale rating per unit, and a defense strength. Movement allowance, I think, is 6 for all units. It's just not handled on the counter because it's essentially superfluous information on this. You also have leaders And leaders have exactly 3 numbers on this instead of the massive 4, which I really didn't like over on the other one. That's going to be a combat rating, a morale rating, and a morale radius. What are we missing on this? I don't remember. We're missing movement, and that would be the 4th. And movement may be higher on the leaders. Okay. So the base sequence of play is actually, nicely enough, poor old magazine games, written on the map, but hard to read because of the hex grid over it. But it's also in the rule book. But it's changed a little bit with the Naval Phase. So the first thing in the sequence of play is this Naval Phase, which is going to be a set of, I think, 5 impulses. We'll go over that later. I'm going to try to integrate some of the naval rules into this, but essentially in this game, the naval game is almost a separate game. There is the possibility of making a naval assault, though. And I had to change my map and write all over it with little numbers. These are like the beaching numbers in Tyre. They're everywhere. If you're going to try to well, not everywhere. They're not on this side of the Golden Horn, which actually raises some interesting questions. Okay. So, after the Naval Phase, the Ottomans get to allocate where his troops are. He's got these different stacks of troops, and they're going to be secretly placed in these different staging areas or assault zones. The Paro one's a little difficult. It actually is separated by the Golden Horn. Mehmet, I believe, pulled part of his navy across the Golden Horn, the land there, in the Paro region, and built a bridge here. Now that doesn't exist at the beginning of the game. And the naval rules, so the base game just kind of abstracts that away and says it happens at a certain time. The naval rules make that a choice that the player gets to make. He gets to divert some of his navy into building the bridge if he wishes, or he can try to use his navy for other reasons. And we'll see what those other reasons are. But as long as that bridge is not built, there's no communications across, or no transfer of anything across here. In particular, there's a large force that starts out there, the only force that starts there, and there's a gun. And that gun's not terribly useful over there in the base game. It could be useful here because it is possible to make naval landings, so you can start bashing the walls here. We also have a bunch of these other guns over here, including some cannons, which are some simply heavier guns. They can't cross the bridge. And Urban's Great Bombard, which I don't remember how big the stones it threw, but it can only fire like 3 times a day, and it tends to blow up. Then the Byzantines are allowed to do a strategic movement, double their movement allowance. Now, the stuff along the wall is all in play at the beginning of the game. Everything kind of behind the wall is in reserve. The Byzantines can't pull that into play until after the Ottomans make a landward assault, an assault. And then they're allowed to move all their pieces to try to cope with whatever the assault is. And from then on, they really can. There are some other abilities to gain these as reinforcements. We can see how that happens. And then, if you remember in Acre, we had tunneling. Well, we have that here too. And I've got a photocopy of sheet. I don't think I have one for this. But we've got a little sheet on the back to handle the mine placements. And in this game, they come from the edge of the map and work their way. Once they make it under a wall, you can trigger it and blow up the wall. Okay. Then, back in the allocation segment, I believe, the Ottoman player has to pick whether he's bombarding or assaulting. Again, like Tyre and Acre. He's allowed to fire all his guns, and then the Byzantine player can repair the damage to the walls. If there's an assault phase, on the other hand, there's no bombardment. The Ottoman player, at this point, if he's doing it, randomly picks one of these chits to see how good his assault is. He doesn't get to know beforehand. And then he'll spend these points on his troops. Now, the cost of the troops is basically the numbers on the leader of the troops. So this would only cost him 5, whereas Mehmed himself would cost 7, etc. If you lose the leader, the group is worth 10. And there's the Bashi Bazooks over here. And they, I believe, come for 1, but they have no leader. Then the Byzantine player is allowed to do tunnel discovery. He's only allowed to do this, I think, during an assault. We'll see if that's correct. And then we go into this set of assault phases, 10 of these. I've read the rules, but it's been a long time since I played, but I've read the rules recently, like last night, but they're blurry. They're not sticking very well. Okay, the Ottoman player moves, and the Byzantine player is allowed to move. Then we have one of these damn simultaneous fire combat phases, and we'll be using this catapult missile fire result table. Everything fires on the same table. If you're firing through a wall, and I think you have to control the wall, but that's not specified there, you get a bonus on this. The effects are ineffective counters, which prevent the unit from doing anything. Well, they reduce the unit's effectiveness. And L, which is losing a step. Now, obviously, if you're behind the walls, you're not going to get hurt. The best that can happen is you get ineffective. Step losses will be covered, as in many games, simply by flipping the counter to a weakened side. And that works with the Byzantines too, I think. Navies are a little different. We'll get to them. All right. Then we go to the Ottoman engineering phase, where he's allowed to try to fill in the fosse. He's got to have units that did not move in the movement phase, and it says attempt, so there may be a die roll on that. We'll get to that. Then the Byzantines are allowed to melee, kind of like an acre, where the defender gets first shot in melee, and then the Ottomans are allowed to melee. Now, melee in this is a little different. It is actually required if you're in a zone of control, but it's only good for the attacker. What you do is you compare the attacker's total strength to the strength of the defending unit. Now remember, there's attack and defense strengths that are different. Multiple attacking units can attack at once. You get a die roll range. That die roll range, if you get within that, and an A is an automatic hit, you cause a casualty, or a possible casualty, and then you roll over here. That can be modified by a minus if you have a leader. His morale effect is subtracted from the die roll. And that causes a result, which can be either ineffective, a retreat, which pulls the Ottomans off the map until the next assault. That's pretty harsh. A number, which is step losses, and if there's an asterisk, that indicates a possible leader loss. I don't remember leader loss numbers. I want to say 5 or 6, like in Acre, but I'm not sure. And that's okay. We haven't really hit the bombardment tables either. We were talking about bombardment before. When you bombard by different weapon types. The units have to, the bombardment has to be in the same region as the gun is in. So it has to hit that same slice of the wall. And you can see they have different values as to how much damage they do. And then the Byzantine player, well, his repair is a little funky in this. Basically, he assigns dice to repair. If I recall correctly. And he can add up to a certain number of successful repairs with each die, but that does not appear to be the correct table for that. We'll have to see. All right. We'll get to that. And then players remove all their ineffective markers from combat units. Now, there's something weird. If you remember, the simultaneous fire combat said they're ineffective until the next fire combat phase. That doesn't seem to be the correct system there. And you'll do this up to 10 times. And at the end of that period, the Ottomans get removed from the map if they haven't won. And then the Byzantines are allowed to repair city walls during an assault. This is different from Acre. Here, whether or not the Ottomans assault, the Byzantines get their repair work in. And then we move another turn, and eventually we'll come to the bottom. And if the Ottomans haven't taken their victory conditions by that point, the Byzantines win. The thought being that's approximately the date that Italian reinforcements were due to arrive. That would have probably thrown a real monkey wrench and maybe even defeated the whole siege. The Ottoman victory conditions are to get 25 strength points of troops inside the city itself. All right. For movement, we have zones of control. Let's see what movement allowance is. Movement is 5 for combat units and 6 for leaders. Okay. Now, like normally, terrain is going to have a big effect on the siege. So we have our terrain effects chart, and the most interesting thing are the Paratakion, which is this here, the height of the level of the terrain that you're on. I'm guessing here, but I'm not positive of this, that the inner city is considered higher than the Paratakion, which is considered higher than the outer area. And we'll make sure that's correct, but I believe that's what it is. So if you're going over an outer or seaward wall, it costs 3 extra movement points. Now, my understanding was you still can't go over them if they're in zones. Well, obviously you can't go over if you get stopped in the zone, because you can't keep moving from zone to zone. But I'm worried, could I cross this? I think I can. The inner wall and the towers in the inner wall are unable to be moved through. But you'll notice something interesting. The outer wall actually is better built and better defended at this point. Well, not better originally built, but it's better maintained. So it gives a bigger penalty to the attacking value. Gates count the same as walls, except that someone controls the gates and can open them up and let you through. And I've had to draw some gates in on the seaward side that were not walled up. All the outer wall gates, with the exception of one down here, I believe. Let's see if that's there. I think there's one here. Yeah, that one. Over there. All of them were actually sealed up before the siege began. There were plenty of gates throughout the whole wall setup. The fosse itself costs 5 movement points to move through. And if you're attacked in it, while you're in it, the attacker gets 2 extra combat strength. If it's filled, it only costs 2 movement points, and there's no bonus to attacking you there. The palaces are these dark red, and I think there's another one under there, the New Imperial Palace. Those cost 2 movement points, which also the clear inside the city do. And the attacker subtracts 2 from his strength when attacking into the palaces. In the city, the Byzantine units lose 1 from their strength if they're defending. All kind of weird stuff here. We got some marshes over there that basically have no effect on the game, but they cost 2 movement points just in case. All right. So, the Ottomans can use... Unfortunately, the train effects chart for this isn't as well done as the one for Acre, surprisingly enough. The Ottomans can use their siege towers, and they have a few of them here, in order to overcome the outer wall. You have to fill the fosse, pull up that. They can't go into the Partekion, though. So even through a breached wall or whatever, you can't get them into this middle area to attack that. You have to deal with that inner wall the ugly way. Any unit inside the city and adjacent to outer wall is higher than units outside the city and gets a defensive benefit when it's attacked through the wall. The inner walls are not in good shape. The Paratekion region is higher than the units in the city proper. However, if you're in towers, you're higher than either the Paratekion or the city proper. So a unit in 1213 would not receive a benefit if attacked from 1212. Let's see. See which way that's meant to go. 1213 would not get... Yeah, because this is a higher hex. So the Paratekion actually means that the guys inside that area are better defended than the ones inside the city. You don't want to be defending that line, but that line's impenetrable. Unless you control the gates. Well, impenetrable not in the sense that you can't attack through it, but impenetrable in the sense that you can't just move through it. These interior city walls are minor hindrances that are listed here somewhere. I don't see them. Here's the effect of a breached wall, the same as a river. +1 strength, -1 to attack across. Inner walls are the same as towers. You can't go across an unbreached hex side and it's 2 off the strength. That's not inner. Inner is this blue stuff, isn't it? Jesus. That's the inner wall. City walls... Yeah, I don't think they gave any values for the city walls. They say that they have something, but I remember that being left out. I may charge an extra movement point to move through them. I mean, after all, they have gates, which cost an extra movement point. The palace hexes give you a defensive bonus, as we said. The new Imperial Palace is level with the Paratekion and adjacent to the Blackernai region. Over here. Blackernai, I think, is this far region. And the old Imperial Palace is level with the city proper. Alright. The gates. The Byzantines control all the gates at the beginning of the game. The movement benefit is given to whoever controls it. In order to gain control, you must control both sides of the gate, both sides adjacent to the gate. You must have units physically occupying or pass through that hex at some point. The gates in the outer wall have been sealed. However, the names are on the board for some reason. Just to remind you, a bit of flavor. The Pertechion is inside the city, but not for victory conditions. We've got Galatia over here, which is essentially just out of play. That's a Genoese colony. Okay. Byzantine units cannot move unless they start stacked with a leader. The leader doesn't have to move with the units. The combat unit has to start with the leader to move. There's no stacking of combat units, but catapults and siege towers don't count. And yeah, we have some catapults somewhere. I don't know where I put them. Oh, they're over here. We also have these sailors who come in automatically in the core game, but now again, because of the naval game, you're allowed to strip your fleets, as was historically done. Siege tower, catapult leaders, they can stack with combat units. How do zones of control work in this? They extend into all land hexes on the map, except through all sea hexes. They can't go through unbreached wall or gate into a higher elevation. They never extend through city walls in either direction. A unit in an unfilled fosse hex doesn't exert one, and units in siege towers do not exert them. You must stop when you enter an enemy zone of control. If you begin in it, you can't go from zone to zone. There's no infiltration, but you can back out and come back elsewhere. Ineffective units have zones of control. If you're in a zone of control, you must attack, but remember, that's not a terrible thing. If you must attack and you have a choice between a unit that's exerting a zone and one that's not, you must hit the one with the zone. But you attack one unit. So if you remember that that chart for the melee results, you're comparing your overall attacker strength of all the units attacking versus a defender's strength. So you don't have to attack all units you're adjacent to, just one of them. All right. The Ottoman player may not assault on the first turn of the game. He can only assault within the area that his troop is in. So if you've got troops committed to this area and they're assaulting, and they're the only ones, say, that are assaulting, you can't cross this line until you've gotten into the city. Once you've gotten past the wall, you're allowed to move around a bit. I've already more or less talked about fire combat. It's again one of these simultaneous things, but there's no retreating or anything going on in it, so it's not as terrible. It shouldn't be as obnoxious as it was in Tyre or Acre. You may never fire through 2 wall or gate hex sides. Let me see if I can find leaders. So leaders add their strength to the unit they're stacked with, up to the strength of the unit they're stacked with. So there's some very good Byzantine leaders, like Giustiani. I'm not seeing because my eyes don't work. Well, this guy adds 2 strength points. So if he was stacked with a 1 strength point attacking unit, which he is, stupid him, he would only add 1 strength point in that. And Giustiani is somewhere. There he is. He's only a 2 strength point. He just adds a high morale value. What's the third number? It's the radius for the morale value. They give their morale bonus to anything within that radius. And only one leader can affect the radius. So we've already talked about bombardment. We don't have to worry about line of sight on that. Urban's bombard, 27 feet long, firing a stone 3 feet high. I seem to remember something about 17 tons, but I don't know. Each time it fires, the Ottoman player has to roll 2 dice. If he gets an 11, exactly, it explodes and it'll come back 3 turns later. Or, yeah. In the same area. Alright, the repairs. This is something I don't remember terribly well. I just know that it's different. So the Byzantine player looks at the repair capability table and rolls a die. This is how many breach levels he might repair. Then he rolls for each wall hex side he wishes to repair. If he has the Johannes Grant engineering counter adjacent to that wall hex, he can add 1 to his die roll. Then he looks at the levels repaired section of the wall repair table. Okay, this I do not remember. There we go. So he rolls to see how much capability he has, and then he rolls again to see how many levels he actually gets to repair. And however many levels he chooses to repair out of this on any given die roll is subtracted from his capability for the turn. So he has a running total as he's rolling, and he, I believe, has to make his decisions as he rolls. So you may want to choose your ordering carefully as to what you want to do, because if you get too many or too few points, or if you get an overage of points but didn't repair everything, that would be a mistake. But that's easy to do. Now, we got Johannes Grana. It's 1 to each hex that he's repairing. Siege works in engineering. The Ottoman player gets to dig 3 tunnel hexes per game turn. He can construct tunnels in any 3 hexes originating from the west edge of the map, branching out in any direction. As long as all hexes in a tunnel are consecutive and contiguous, they can cross the assault area lines. They cannot be built across a sea or river hex side, and there is a river cutting across there to help you understand some kind of divisiveness there. You roll a die on the type of terrain. There's going to be a tunnel table. There it is. And we get modifiers. If it's under the Partition or adjacent to a wall, you add 2, making it more likely the tunnel will collapse or have a rock. Now, a tunnel collapses is extreme. That has more of an effect than it looks like there. The Ottoman player keeps this all secret. When you dig under the fosse, the Partition, or a city hex, it counts as 2 hexes for tunneling, but you only have to roll the die once. Yeah, I don't see a difference between tunnel collapses and a rock. It looks like there should be. Once you dig under a wall, on the next turn, you're allowed to announce the location and blow a wall hex side adjacent to the tunneled hex. The blown wall is breached for the remainder of the game and cannot be repaired. So you have to actually tunnel past the wall. It doesn't have to be a level 1 of an outer wall. You could do it to an inner wall and not blow on the outer wall, because it may be easier The outer wall may be more interesting to assault. The Byzantine player is allowed to discover tunnels and destroy them, but only in the assault phase. He calls out 3 hexes on the map, plus any 3 hexes adjacent to his Johannes Grant leader. In the damage repair segment of the bombardment phase, the Byzantine player is also able to guess 3 hexes adjacent to Johannes Grant, but only those 3 hexes, so he's only able to look directly near the wall. I guess the idea is some kind of, while the chaos of an assault is coming, he can try to sneak out and maybe try to find where the tunnels are or something. I don't know. I don't understand the counter-mining in this, nor do I understand the naval very well, which also has that kind of a little abstract and you're not sure what exactly they're trying to do. The representation is getting a little bit off the hinges. Okay. If the hex searched is a hex with the tunnel in existence, the tunnel is discovered and the Ottoman player informs the Byzantine player. It's closed down in 3 hexes in all directions, counting the hex in which the discovery was made. Only hexes that have already been tunneled and are connected to the discovered hex are closed down, and they're considered destroyed, X's which cannot be built on again, just like a rock or tunnel collapses, I guess. I think there was supposed to be a difference between those two, but I don't have any indication. The fosse can be filled. The Ottoman player can't move. He has to be adjacent to it, and it looks like he just dropped stuff in there. In the Byzantine repair segment, only of the assault phase, this is the one, he's allowed to empty filled fosses on a 1 through 4. On a 5 or a 6. So if the Ottomans don't assault, you don't get to play with the fosses either. Basically, after the assault, I think you're allowed to, like, it's assumed that the Ottomans are straggling back. They don't have their patrols up in as good a situation. So you're able to do some more stuff, hunting tunnels, filling the fosse. You add 1 to the die roll if Johannes Grant is adjacent to the hex. The siege towers, there's 5 of these. They move 4 per segment. They must be with a unit for their entire movement, and that unit is basically in it pushing it, differentiating this from acre. They cannot enter unfilled fosse. They have no combat strength of their own. They and their inhabitants are not subject to fire combat, but they are susceptible to Greek fire. If you're within 2 hexes of a siege tower, of a catapult, or any other combat unit is adjacent to it, it can fire. Oh, you know, I haven't mentioned missile combat. All units in this game are missile capable. So you'll be firing missile combat on here at everything. It's just the catapults have this greater range on this. They may also on regular missile fire. If you fire at one and that takes your firing opportunity, on a 5 or 6 you destroy the tower, any unit in it is destroyed and it can't be rebuilt, the tower. Or the unit for that matter. But if you're in a siege tower and adjacent to a wall hex, you can cross that hex for only +1 movement point, and you get a defensive bonus of 1 if the attacker's trying to attack you while you're in a siege tower. These can be assigned to divisions at the Ottoman's player choice. It can never cross the outer wall, so they're only useful for getting over that. The bridge across the Golden Horn can only be used for the gun counters and units. Okay, what about leaders? We talked about the combat rating. We have some idea of the morale rating. That's going to be a minus on the casualty possibility table. It reduces your chance of losing or having units disrupted. We didn't fully talk about the bridge across the Golden Horn, how you build that. And then the morale radius is the range at which you can give the morale bonus. Ottoman units can move and fight without a leader. However, the leadership is what you pick your off your chit, your assault capability chip. Okay. So, let's go back to constructing the bridge across the Golden Horn. The base rules are, on turn 10, that appears. That changes a little bit here. We'll talk about that. We have to do the Great Portage for that to happen. Or, if I can slip at least 5 Ottoman units into, naval units into the Golden Horn. That may be the Portage. That just replaces the original rules. And then we're able to move the units that are over there. Now, I am going to take... Well, let's finish the leaders here. A leader... We're almost done. Alright, we'll just plug in. I hate doing this with the cable because my hand's already hurting. But yeah, it's not too bad. Okay. Let's see. So leaders take casualties in melee or through Ottoman tunneling. And let's see, 11.15. Yeah, if you blow up a mine on a 5 or a 6, units and leaders adjacent to it get hurt or killed. But the other one is combat 9.26. I like the numbering on SPI games. I'm not griping about it. Certain results on the casualty table, yeah. If you get an asterisk, a 5 or a 6, something happens. On a 6, you're killed. On a 5, you're wounded, and you roll again, and that's how many full game turns that you're out of play. And remember, for the Ottoman player, if you don't have your leader for the force that you're paying points for, it costs you 10 points to bring that force into play. So generally, losing your leader means you can't use that. Okay, special leaders. Mehmet. If Mehmet's killed, the game is over. The Ottomans lose. Another option is the Ottomans immediately call off that assault. Can't do anything for 3 turns at all. And the Janissaries cost 10 to bring into play. All other divisions cost 1 more than they normally would. We'll play with the core rule because I think that's the more realistic. I cannot see the assault continuing if Mehmet died. Giustiani. This is a Genoese mercenary. On the last day of the battle, he took a severe wound and he fled to Chios, where he died a few days later. His followers likewise deserted the walls, and the Ottoman assault carried the city. If he is killed or suffers a wound that forces him out of play for more than 4 turns, he flees. He's removed from play, and at the beginning of the following movement segment of the assault phase, all Genoese combat units are also removed from play. This can pretty much end things. Now, he's a really potent dude, so you kind of want to use him, but losing him can cost you a lot. The Byzantine sailors, in the base core game, they and the leaders Dido and Trebisano, I have here and here, can enter the game 1 unit per turn. I don't remember what turn that starts with. Turn 12. Okay. There are actually multiple games to this. One option is the assault game, which sort of abstracts the wall shooting and all that. But that's no fun. The reason I like a siege is to play that part out. I actually don't care as much about the assault. Okay, so on to moves and the great naval rules. And these are indeed not a simple game. First of all, each naval counter has a number of values. A melee strength, a ram strength. The Byzantines don't have this. If we can zoom in, you can see there's zeros on theirs. Ah, I could show you on the magazine. That's probably more readable. Their ships are galleys, which apparently don't ram. I'm not sure what they mean by that. They also are not oar-powered. They're sail-powered. I've meant to look up to try to see what the hell Berg is talking about with this. I do not know. I always thought galleys are, kitchens. No. Oar-powered ships, and even things like galleasses are combined oar and sail power. Well, not in the case in this game. Whatever those are, they are pure sailing ships. There's also a ram defense strength, and we'll look at the combat chart for these in a minute. This is the oar cruising speed and ram speed, and then this is the maximum sailing speed. Now this game is weird, but it's unlikely you're going to use the naval game very much. The Byzantines don't want to come out from the boom. They're doing their job there. Well, they might if there's a huge Ottoman naval incursion to try to take the walls. But other than that, I can't see them trying to sail out. So then it becomes well, what do you do with this? Okay. There's also going to be a wind direction table. Few extra tables here. Let's take a look at some of these. There's these wind tables which determine the velocity and direction of the wind, which is especially important for ships. The melee table, which works off differentials. And then this ramming table, where the goal is generally to pin the enemy ship. Alright, let's keep going. We have a bunch of rules changes. The biggie here is the Naval Phase. Added to the sequence of play, it's done at the beginning. First you roll to see what the wind is like. On the first turn you don't worry about that. It's set speed 8 going north, I think, or coming from the north or something like that. I think it's going north. Who knows? You roll for initiative. That's completely random. Unlike the alternating turns, here each impulse, there's going to be what, 5 impulses here? Yeah, 5 impulses, and the players can agree not to do them. And each one is going to be random in terms of order, so you don't know before you go who's going to go first. Then one player moves, which includes ramming. The second player moves, including possible ramming. And then players get to attack each other. And that actually works somewhat. Some of this is somewhat similar to Tyre's naval rules, but it's not exactly the same. Among other things, we have sailing ships. Movement is kind of complicated. First of all, your oar speed movement, you can just go the maximum oar speed or the maximum, essentially ramming speed, but it's not really required to ram. If you do this super speed, though, you're only allowed like 1 movement point on your next turn, and all kind of other restrictions here. No zones of control in naval. You can't use the ramming, battle speed, whatever, 2 segments in a row. And if you use it, you have a cruising speed of 1 on your next segment. There. If you have both oar and sail, this is only Ottoman ships, you can change mode of propulsion. In order to do this, you move a speed of 1 in oar move, no more than 1 hex in oar mode. And then you put your sails up, and now you're sailing. Now, here's what's weird. This game does not give you enough counters, obviously, for even the ships. There are going to be required additional counters, like, do I have my sails up or not? I may end up pulling some stuff out of flying colors here, since I have it still out. It also doesn't keep... Well, we'll see this on the sailing rules, but sailing movement is going to require a sail speed to be tracked. Now, that almost doesn't make sense. In fact, this whole sailing module is really, really abstracted. It's going to be played out as though it's a tactical battle, but it's on a scale that doesn't really work out as a tactical battle, where you're actually, keeping this momentum through your movement, and it takes you days maybe to cross the Sea of Marmosa, when it should probably take, a couple hours, right? At most. All right. I think it's a 2-day scale. Anyway. On to the sail movement. I don't understand sail movement. So the wind is either generally coming from behind you or generally coming from in front of you. If you're moving into the wind, it costs you 2 movement per. Your velocity for your ship is allowed to be up to your maximum sail speed and up to the maximum of the wind that's there. And if you're above the maximum of the wind, you'll start losing velocity slowly. I'm not at all sure what this is meant to represent. Or ships get to turn, I think, freely 60 degrees with each hex they move into. Sailing ships are a little bit more maneuverable. They can turn 60 or 120 degrees. The 120 degrees costs them a movement point, though. And you can't change facing, after you change facing twice, then you have to move forward before you can change facing again, which is the same as the other thing. You cannot change facing through the wind. And we're going to need a little wind marker or something. If you're not moving, you can still turn a hex side unless you've been rammed and pinned. If you enter a coastal hex, you have to worry about these numbers. If you enter one such that you can't leave, you've run aground and you're destroyed. However, if you manage to kind of beach on one of those coastal hexes, that's cool. And then you make a roll against the beaching number, and if you can roll higher than the beaching number, you can land. You still have to deal with the wall there, though. And those walls are going to be pretty hard to knock down over here. It looks pretty easy for the Byzantines to defend anything over there. Over here, I could use some guns to knock down these walls across the Golden Horn. I guess. Certainly you can't shoot at anything else. All right. So warp-driven ships can ram. And ramming is going to be, like in Tyre, trying to hit a side space on the enemy ship with your bow. You must be using full battle speed, so you do have to. And you have to be at least 3 hexes from the target when you start your ram. You can make no more than one 60-degree turn during the entire course, and that turn has to be at least 2 hexes from the target when you do it. You move adjacent. You compare the ram number of your ship versus the ram defense of the ship, and you'll get a number. That number is the amount needed for a pin. I could pull pin counters from Tyre, but I could also use grapples or something else, vowels from Flying Colors. If you get an asterisk on a 5 or a 6, the defending ship is sunk. If any time that you roll a 6, the attacking ship is going to be damaged. Now, only Ottoman ships can be damaged, and they get flipped over to a reduced value. Whoa, sorry about that. Which will be on the back of the counter. Basically, these are going to match up to these, whatever. And I've got them hopefully correctly done. Your goal in this is generally to pin the enemy so that you can slide more ships up adjacent to him, and he can't sail away. If he's pinned, he can't get out as easily. Once you get if you have a ship pinned, or two ships pinned together, or if you can slide up so that your side is adjacent to their side, and they don't have to be directly parallel, then you can melee them. But remember, if they move second, they could slide away from you during that. So that's one reason you want to pin. You can have up to four ships of yours attacking one enemy ship, and you'll be rolling a differential here. They go into some rules onto how you can soak off in this, and who you have to attack. And that's kind of a little complicated, like most of these naval rolls. Not as simple as Tyre's rolls, which were annoying enough. So you get to split your these almost seem poorly written at times. Like, well, no, they seem poorly written. I think they're not unambiguous from my reading before. So you're allowed to split your strength. However, your lowest differential is -3, and you must attack everything, I think, sort of, kind of. It seems to contradict that at points. Melee is going to be mutual and simultaneous. So it's possible you can damage units elsewhere. Leaders have no effect on naval combat, except that Byzantine naval units commanded by Dido or Trevisano add 1 to their melee strength for defensive purposes. So the Byzantines actually have these leaders who count as naval leaders. Okay. Now losses on here can go to L, which is lose 1, D, which is damaged. If it's a Byzantine ship, it's destroyed. If it's an Ottoman ship, it's flipped over. Or ineffective, which means the next movement allowance is halved and the ship may not melee. Obviously can't ram. Okay. The Ottoman player can use his ships to carry land units, 1 per ship. Only on full strength ships. Ships carrying land units are perfectly combat capable in all ways. That's again a difference from Tyre. They can debark them in any coastal hex with 2 exceptions. The land units may not debark in a hex in which they must cross a wall to reach, and they cannot debark in Galatia. If you move land combat units and leaders into a coastal hex, they may not move or attack until an assault phase. So you got to be kind of planning an assault at the same time as you do that. And hopefully you have the points to activate them, I guess. You can't bring siege towers with you on the boat. So they're going to be kind of hanging out outside the wall. You can have units waiting to climb the walls. Well, what does that mean? Didn't it say I couldn't? I couldn't debark them if they have to cross a wall hex to reach. But elsewhere it says if I'm adjacent to a wall along the edge of the city, yeah, I can't walk along the beach, that's for sure. It looks like I'm allowed to climb from the ships and I count as an unfilled fosse hex. All very, again, contradictory here. Ottoman units, let me look again. I think what that means is I can't debark from here, say, into here, or something like that. I don't know. I think that's what is trying to be expressed, because it certainly seems like I can climb the walls here. Otherwise, I wouldn't want to land there, because there's no way those walls will get knocked down, I don't think. I don't know. Let's look at bombardment. See if I can shoot the walls out that aren't near me. Yeah, I don't think that works. It's not... Yeah, you can only fire within your assault area. Ottoman artillery and para can only shoot at 3612 through 3124. Let's see if I can find those. 3612. And that's down here. So I can shoot from para just along there, basically, which is what I thought. And that's pretty useless in the basic game without the Navy. Alright, and nothing is going to get me these walls. Those walls are sturdy, and I probably don't want to try them. Not with the beaching rolls. The Ottomans have a pretty good army here. Wasting it attacking the walls to try to get weak spots just does not seem like it's valuable. Alright. So any Ottoman units that do a sea assault only count as 1 point of strength each for victory, regardless of their attack strength. So you probably can't get enough ships to win over the city. You might be able to land and do kind of an end run, though, and especially over on this side if you can get there, and help break the Byzantines' back hold on the wall down so that more of your land-bound troops can get in. The boom. So if you remember, the boom in Tyre was pretty much invulnerable, or the booms in Tyre. It's not quite the same here. Here it doesn't double the strength. All it does is it adds 1 to the defensive strength of the ships behind it. But the Byzantine ships behind it are quite strong. Let's see if we got numbers there. We got like 7 and 6 melee strength. That's very high. And we have an 8-point Genoese ship, which is coming in no earlier than turn 4. That's pretty high compared to what the Ottoman ships have. And remember, they have to attack everything adjacent to them that they're legally allowed to attack. So they're going to have to soak at least some strength off for other attacks, and they're going to get hurt. You can't ram through the boom. The person who controls the boom gets to sail through it, but you're also allowed to destroy it. You have to keep a friendly ship next to it for a full movement segment with no enemy ships adjacent, and then you can destroy it. That's not easy to do. There are drift rules, and the ships adjacent to the boom are not subject to that, which is basically things that aren't moving shift 1 with the wind. Yeah, I know I haven't really explained the naval rules fully. The Ottoman player can bombard ships. Only ships in the Golden Horn can be bombarded. For each gun point in para, over here, I can bombard 1 Byzantine ship. I roll a 2 dice. On a 2 or 12, it sinks the ship. On an 11, it damages the ship, while Byzantine ships, when damaged, are sunk. Yeah, not paying a lot of attention to the rule here. But still. Okay. And I'm not sure whether or not I should allow that 11 to be another sink result, essentially, or whether that's not what was intended. Okay, the Byzantine player has the ability to strip his crews off his galleys. The way he's going to do this is he's going to flip over his galley counter, and that brings a sailor unit into play. There's a much, much weaker side to those galleys. Let's take a look and see what we're looking at. Like these 5s and 7s and everything, they turn into 1s and 2s on the melee strength. Not enough to hold the boom. When am I allowed to do this? looks like at any time. Of course, I do not want to allow the Ottomans into the Straits, but I have one ship that I could reduce immediately, basically, and may get a second one if the Genoese galleys make their way in. If for every 2 ships that I flip, I'm able to grab one of my leaders and bring him into play as well. And then from then on, the Byzantine sailors treated just like land combat units, except I could bring them back to join the ship again. The Great Portage. All right. Mehmet failed twice at the boom, and then he decided to carry his fleet overland behind Galata and build that bridge across there, which you can almost see. There we go. In order to do this, in order to attempt it, the Ottoman player has to make 2 successive naval combat segments assaulting the boom. What's a naval combat segment? That is full sets of 5 impulses. I mean, he doesn't have to do it throughout the hull. It's just in 2 turns. Successive, that doesn't say contiguous. The Ottomans must use at least 3 ships attacking. However, he can never attempt the portage before game turn 6, or by the time turn 20 rolls around, he can attempt it anyhow. Once he fulfills those requirements, he can attempt the portage. He may portage triremes, biremes, or fustae. He may portage as many as he likes. After planning, the Ottoman player rolls a die. He adds it to the assault capability on the turn record track, the assault capability number. This is going to be added to the number that you get here. I forgot to mention that. So as the game goes on, you get more and more acceptable right to make your assault. If that total equals 5 or more, then you place the ships you want in para within 5 hexes of 2623, which is going to be there, not in Galata. You must start in the Bosporus on a paracoastal hex. And then they can move the next turn after they've been portaged. And now for the this has been added at the beginning of this. Once you get at least 5 naval units in the Golden Horn at the same instant, now you have a bridge for the rest of the game, which you don't have to protect or anything as far as I can see. And I remember there's a place where the Byzantine or where the Ottomans are allowed to stack all their naval units, which I don't remember where it's listed. Oh. Yeah, I don't see it. I'll find it. It's really not a big deal, but that's where they can keep all their ships. In particular, if a storm happens, which is a possibility here, damage occurs to your ships if they're out at sea. But if they're safely in the Golden Horn or in this dual pillars, wherever it is, they're all right. Let me look at for the wind table. Yeah. Piecing together 2 sets of rules with case numbers doesn't work terribly well. This is something I learned from SFB and their little booklets. So I don't see it, and I'm not too worried about it. I'll find it as I go, I think. I keep looking at these Cobra errata. That's got nothing to do with it. Oh, there we go. The velocity for the wind direction and velocity. You roll 2 dice, you roll more. Then we get an example that tells me nothing. Because I can't understand examples. Then we get another example. And I'm not seeing... Okay, in the event that the wind velocity is storm, all ships, sail or in the Golden Horn or at anchor, may not move for that game turn. Anchor is being in a coastal hex with a 0 movement rate. For ships at sea, you roll a die for each ship. If you roll a 6, the ship and any passengers are eliminated. Any other number, the Ottoman goes back to the double columns, 39, 31. Oh, there it is. And he's allowed to stack all his ships there, which actually indicates port facilities deeper onto the map. All right, that's that. I remember enjoying this game a decent amount before I bought the the Art of Siege set. Enough that I wanted the games that went with it. I haven't played it that much since then. I never played anything much. But I'm not sure. I think it's better than Tyre and Acre as the base land game. I think I enjoyed it more than them. Not necessarily better. I think I enjoyed it more. With the naval rules, I'm not so sure. They may add too much of a burden, a couple more hours of play for very little value, because when it comes down to it, what are you going to do? You're going to try to launch an attack against these walls? Nah. So you're going to try to force the boom. Well, that's going to fail. It just can't be done is basically the issue. Unless I get really lucky blowing things up with a gun, and there is an extra boat there just in case I do. And another one coming in on turn 4. So I'd have to get really, really lucky die rolls. But the whole land game dealing back here is a lot of fun. And reducing the walls and everything. Then Tyre and Acre, especially Acre, sort of felt like this. And Acre with the assaults coming from outside really hooked me as kind of cooler. This one, though, doesn't have the irritating aspects of... yes, it has a mutual... missile fire, but it's not as irritating as the way it works out in Acre, or in Tyre for that matter. But anyway, let's send this one up, and God knows if I'll get to start tonight. I'm awfully pooped already.